Okay, I'm back. I have another series. Well, hopefully it won't be a series. I'm going to try to get it done in one video. Um, but this one is going to be about, and I kind of alluded to it in the video where I talked about uh, capitalism, Trump's racism. That was another series I did. And in there, I talked about the fact that Black people need to decide who it is they want to be when they grow up, quote unquote. And what I mean by that is we've called ourselves so many different things, we've taken on so many different identities, and it's like a search to find what is the blackest a person can be and be true to the game and be uh, considered not a sellout and someone who is, just down for being uh, a real one, as they call it. And I decided to start this off with this is something that I discovered years ago that I thought was really, really interesting because, like a lot of people, uh, Black people in particular, I thought that skin color determined if whether or not you're Black or how Black you are. And I found out nothing could be further from the truth. Um, but anyway, I'm going to go ahead and play an excerpt from this video. This man's name is Mustafa. This is it's an updated version of but the original video is very old. Um, so what he's doing now, I have no idea. But the title of it is "I'm Black and Egyptian, Not White," and he's getting ready to explain this. And so I'm going to go ahead and let him explain it better than I can.
I am a black Egyptian. My father is much darker than I am. My mother is lighter than I am. Uh, in Egypt, people are identified by the religion first, not the race. So in Egypt, if you are Christian, you are a minority person. But if you're black, you're not a minority person. You are a part of the mainstream society. And I came from this background. And in Egypt, you identify as Arab and as Muslim. And in this country, when I first came, I identified myself as Arab American and Muslim first. And gradually, I became to identify myself as black. I came to the U.S. in 1978, and I became U.S. citizen in 1985. When I became a U.S. resident, I was told by the immigration naturalization that I'm white. And I told them that I'm black, and they said, no, in this country, you are white. All Arabs in this country, all Arab immigrants are white. I didn't pay much attention at the beginning to this because in the Arab world, we identify with our ethnicity first as Arabs, and then with the race second as black or white or whatever. But in this country, you identify with your racial group first and then with your ethnicity second. Gradually, I became black first and Arab second. And I rejected my white classification publicly for the first time in 1987, in February, as a panelist in a function sponsored by the Association of the Study of Black Life and History in Detroit. I said that I belong to two minority groups. I'm Arab American and Black American, and I'm racially black and ethnically Egyptian. I was harassed by my employer right after that. I work for a white school district. The superintendent is white. All the associate superintendents are white, even though that we provide services to 30% black population. But the organization is white and the approach is very white. The attitude towards me changed completely after I went out publicly and rejected my white classification. Uh, One coworker came to me and told me, a white coworker came to me and told me right after the function that he met with the superintendent, and if I don't keep my mouth shut, my educational career is over. He said, you have nothing to do with these people, you have a history and a culture. These people came from the jungle, you have nothing to do with them. These people lie and steal. When I see one of them in my neighborhood, I call the police. And
Okay. Um, and I'm going to get back to some of that later, but that's just to give you an overview of what this is about. Long story short, or as some would say, long story longer, black is not, or white is not really a color in this country. It is a class status. That's what it actually is. And you just heard him explain that. You could see what he looks like. You heard what he said. And later on, he's going to explain why. There is a why behind that. It's not just, that's just the way it is. There is a why. And I'm definitely going to let you hear that part also. But my point is, we've got a lot of black people who think that it's our skin color, it's your hair, it's because of where we came from, if we're seen to be from African descent. And that's not to say that they don't take those things into consideration. And it's not to say that visually that you're not discriminated against visually because you're black. I'm not going to insult anybody's intelligence and try to act like when you're discriminated against visually, that it's not because you're visibly a black person. But the idea that black people are less than, and because they're black, simply because of skin color, he just told you. He's black. You can see him. And yet he's classified as white. So in other words, they didn't want to let an Egyptian have, even a black Egyptian have a black classification, because they're looking at that as being something that was more considered a higher classification, which would be European, which they call white. We know there's no such thing as actual white people, because there's not. And there's no such thing as actual black people either, because there's not. Even the darkest person from Sudan is brown under a microscope. It's just a higher concentration of brown melanin, dark brown melanin. But no one is actually black, no one is actually white. So you're talking about a classification for a status. White in this country being the highest status you could be. This is basically a racial caste system that we live in. But that classification can be given to whoever they want to give it to. And that's what this is about. So I'm getting ready to play another excerpt of it so you can get to the why.
But the organization is white and the approach is very white. The attitude towards me changed completely after I went out publicly and rejected my white classification. One coworker came to me and told me, a white coworker came to me and told me right after the function that he met with the superintendent, and if I don't keep my mouth shut, my educational career is over. He said, you have nothing to do with these people, you have a history and a culture. These people came from the jungle, you have nothing to do with them. These people lie and steal. When I see one of them in my neighborhood, I call the police. And I was told by the director of general education, who's retired now, in '88, I was told by him that I get people angry when I say that I'm black Egyptian. If I just say that I'm Egyptian, I would get along. I have to add that I was denied promotion twice because I chose black classification. This is part of my 2 lawsuits against my employer, which are currently pending. 2 lawsuits.
Now, just for the education of our viewership, why don't you share with us a breakdown of Egypt as it is today, insofar as blacks or combinations thereof of European descent, what have you?
We don't have Egyptians of European descent in Egypt. We have a population which is basically which is basically a mixture of ancient Egyptian blacks who intermarried with Arabs right after the Arab conquest. The ancient Egyptian population was brown and black before the Arab conquest. But before the Arab conquest came the Greeks. It was the ancient Egyptian population was in Egypt for thousands of years. The ancient Egyptian population was brown and black. And the Greeks came in 300 BC. And they started to intermarry with the local population. And then the Romans came and ruled from 70 BC until they were conquered by the Arabs and kicked out by the Arabs in the 7th century. and these people intermarried with the Egyptian Copts, and they made the pigmentation of the Egyptians, the Copts, much lighter because of this intermarriage with Europeans.
Now, you're an educator, okay? Now, how do you deal with situations when you practice your profession insofar as dealing with the mythology or the misconceptions about Egypt being a white civilization? How do you deal with that?
This is a big problem because Egypt, the ancient Egyptian civilization was a black civilization, and ancient Egyptians were black according to the Greek scholars and the Roman scholars. Ancient Egypt became white only in the 19th century and in the 20th century. And the scholar who is responsible for this is Seligman, the noted anthropologist from England, Seligman. White supremacy argues that blacks are inferior than white intellectually. They are subhuman and they are incapable of building a civilization. White supremacy had one dilemma until Seligman came. The dilemma was ancient Egypt was black according to the Greek and the Roman scholars. 10 of them said that, including Aristotle and Plato. 10 of them said that in writing. They had this dilemma: ancient Egyptian was black. So if blacks are inferior intellectually and are incapable of building a civilization, how come the ancient Egyptians built a civilization? Seligman found the solution for this dilemma. He came up with a theory called the Hamite theory. He separated the blacks who built a civilization in Egypt and Ethiopia from the rest of the black race, and he called them brown-skinned whites, or the Hamites. So Seligman saved white supremacy from this dilemma, and all the white scholars followed him from that time on. This was at the end of the 19th century. And since that time, white scholarship says that ancient Egypt is white.
Mustafa Hefni is currently working on his doctorate degree at Wayne State University. His dissertation topic is a content analysis of the treatment of ancient Egypt in world history text.
Okay. So now you understand from his perspective what he's going through, or what he went through rather, because this was years ago when he did this. He says at the end that he took it all the way to the Supreme Court to fight it. And what I wanted you to get to see is the fact that the color black in this country, or white, should I say, the color white in this country, is a class status. And so every other immigrant that comes to America pretty much understands that. He, just like he got the understanding of it when he got here. We're the ones that don't know. We're the ones that thinks it's all about skin color, ebonics, the ghetto, whatever, that separates us from them, and it's not. It's a class status. And so what we see is when black people get to the place to where they get high enough up in society, they're basically treated as an honorary white person. In other words, that status is transferable, depending on who they want to transfer it to. But the bottom line is, whether you would agree with my perception of that or not, the bottom line is, as you can see, it's not skin color. That's not what it means. It's a class status. So the idea that we have to be as black as we can possibly be, as far as our attitude and this, that, and the third, that's not something that really resonates with the rest of society, because you get a status because of the power that you have. In other words, for white people to even claim that, they can only do that because of the power position that they're in. And we haven't learned anything at all through our black leadership of people like Malcolm, for instance. Power is not given, it's taken. It's not given, it's taken. It's never given, it's taken. Real power. Because if someone gives you power to do something, the person that gave it to you can take it back. And I think we've seen that too. So this has nothing to do with Egypt. This has nothing to do with whether or not black people were originally in Egypt. He gave you the history. I don't need to give you the history. You know what history you know. This isn't about Egypt. But I just wanted to put that out there because, again, a lot of black people have a misconception of what white and black is in America. And he just showed you what it really is, better than I could tell you. And so then we get to the word, even to the word black. And that even in itself can be confusing in certain contexts. You have black people who look at the word Negro as being somewhat of a derogatory term over black. You know, I've seen it in social media where if they go to insult somebody, they'll actually make the word knee, as in your knee that you bend and grow, and they'll put those two words together, you know, and it's supposed to be basically an insult is what it is. It's a derogatory type term. But Negro, the word Negro, Negro, or if you want to put an E on it, it's up to you. That word actually, of course, is a Spanish word that simply means black. So whether you call someone Negro or you call them black, you're still calling them black if you call them Negro. That's all it is. We've been led to believe somewhere along the line, I guess because Negro sounds closer to nigger, that that Negro is some type of perverted term for what a real nigger is. You know, a real nigger is not supposed to be a Negro. But Negroes just simply means black. So it's crazy. It doesn't even make sense. And not to mention the fact, as I already mentioned, scientifically, no one is actually black. We're different hues of brown, from very, very light brown all the way to very, very dark brown. But no one is actually black, just like no one is actually white. And so none of that makes sense. So, like I said, again, you're talking about statuses when you're starting to talk about that type of thing. And another thing I'll also add into that is we didn't get done a big favor, and I think even Martin Luther King knew that before he died, that when he made that speech, and one of the things he said was he was looking for the day when we would be judged by the content of our character and not the color of our skin. What he was really saying, whether he realized that's what he was saying or not, I think he did, quite personally, but what he was basically saying was, okay, white people, you can judge somebody black and say that they deserve everything they're going to get from law enforcement, from to a racist who wants to attack them or whatever, if their character is in question. But if they've got the kind of character that, for instance, he had and his constituents had, whereas you're educated, articulate, well-dressed, well-mannered, basically conservative, if you want to be honest about it, as far as worldview and values. If you're that, if that's what your character is, then okay, treat me accordingly. Treat me accordingly. In other words, treat me better than you would ever think of trying to treat someone who would be considered, a thug, just dumb, lazy, thuggish, whatever. You can treat them any kind of, whatever they get, they're going to deserve, but treat me better. That's what that really means at the end of the day. Because if you're going to judge me the content of my color, of my character rather, and not the color of my skin, what else does that mean if we're all black? What else could it possibly mean? It could mean anything else but. And the problem with that is that a white person who's objective in their thinking, they're going to do that anyway. That's what separates them from being a racist. Black people who are not white people who are not racist, and no, I don't believe all white people are racist. I know some black people do. Some black people have that mentality of, well, if they're not, then they don't do it. They're still benefiting from racism. And so that somehow makes them a racist. I don't agree with that. I think racism has to be intentional. So if someone isn't intentionally racist, I don't believe that they're racist. That's my personal opinion. But anyway, that aside, an objective-minded white person, and we all know some, even black people who claim to even say all white people are racist, whatever, we all know at least one white person that we're cool with that we don't have that attitude about. You can go to almost any black neighborhood in America, and there's somebody white that they're cool with. Let's just be real about that. So they're not the ones that would need to be told that. That's my point. They wouldn't need to be told, judge me by the content of my character and not the color of my skin, because they're going to do that anyway. They've already done it. That's the reason why they're cool with you, because they do that. It's the racist white person and the bigoted-minded white person who won't do that. Because in their mind, the content of your character is the color of your skin. They look at depraved behavior in black people as being synonymous with being black. Those are the people who everything, even in their language and in everything they think, black is evil. And we've all seen that even in the dictionary. A black cat, what do they say about the black cat? And it's going to be a dark day, and this person is a black-hearted person. They'll even say that about a white person. Oh, he's a black-hearted person. What do you mean black-hearted? Because everything to them, black is negative and is evil. So for someone like that, that's just their total mental capacity, is that anything dark or black is evil. In their minds, the content of your character is the color of your skin, because they don't see anything. They're the white hat, black hat people. The hero always wears the white hat. The villain wears the black hat. That's the only way they think. That's all they see. So you're not going to get that person to think that the content of your character could be opposite from the color of your skin when they think it's synonymous with the color of your skin. It's not going to happen. And it didn't happen. And that's the reason why we haven't seen the type of progress racially in this country that we should have seen, given the fact that you've had all those years of Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders and all the speeches and everything that we've had happen. Black people in key positions, black people been promoted to CEOs and, entrepreneurs. They become millionaires and billionaires, highly successful people, educated people. You turn on the TV, you can't hardly, switch a channel without seeing one in an anchor position on news stations and things of that nature. But at the same time, the racial climate toward black people hasn't changed. Why? Because racists still see your color as synonymous with your character. So it doesn't work on them. And I think before Martin Luther King died, he understood that. And so this whole idea that somehow or another we can transcend from that by doing anything in particular. You know, some black people have been bleaching their skin and straightening their noses and all that kind of stuff, and it doesn't change anything. It changes absolutely nothing. Because if they ever knew you were black before, that's all that counts. And it's not even, and it even goes deeper than that. And I'll try to tell a quick story. When I was in management, when I was in retail management, I had a Filipino lady that worked for me, and she was in the cosmetic department. And she looked like a Filipino to me, but you know, some of them have more melanin than others. She was a very pale skinned Latino woman. And she was so pale, she was actually whiter than most white people in appearance. And on 2 different occasions, with 2 different people that were not connected at all, one was a white man and one was a white woman. Both of them were younger. They weren't old people. They were, I don't know, probably mid-30s, early 20s or whatever. They came in to complain about her when she wasn't there. And of course, I have more than one person working in the department. She's only one of them. So they came in and both of them said, you know, that black woman that works back here. And at that particular place that I worked at, I was the only black person there. There was no black woman that worked there. There was no other black person that worked there. I was the only one. And I definitely wasn't in the management department, the cosmetic department. I was the manager. So anyway, so I'm like, who are you talking about? Well, you know, that black woman that works back here. She's usually here, you know, such time. And I'm like, but there's no black woman that works here. So finally, when they kept going, you know, from the back and forth, finally I figured out it's her they're talking about. And I'm like, well, she's not black. And both of them, right on cue, even though they were not connected, they were not together, it didn't happen at the same time, both of them said, well, all I know is she ain't white. That was their answer. Well, I didn't know that, but all I know is she wasn't white. But yet and still she was whiter than they were in appearance. So my point is, for white people, black people to think that somehow or another that they can shed their blackness and that that's going to make a difference, no. If they knew that you weren't black, that you're not white, then you're not going to be white when they get done. Because they're not like the government. You know, in this man's case, the government said that anybody coming from Egypt was white because they didn't want to give black people credit for the pyramids and for Europe and for Egyptian culture. They didn't want to give them credit for that. That's what that was all about. But the public at large, and particularly white people who don't have power, like these white people were, they came in the store. They were just average people with no power and no say-so. Those are the ones that Martin Luther King was talking about, who are supposed to be judged us by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. And that's just how far away from that they are. That even this Filipino woman, who obviously was not black, they were calling her black because the only thing they knew for a fact was she wasn't white. That's how deep that goes. And so, you know, we have to decide if we're going to have to decide whether we like it or not. Exactly how we're going to perceive ourselves in this world. And that has to be in concert with the way that everyone else sees us. And we have to move accordingly. And unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to wrap this up in one segment. There is going to be another one because I didn't want to make this too long. So I'll see you in the next segment.
And just how far is this determined Egyptian willing to go to be classified black?
I want to carry my kids all the way up to the U.S. necessary.
At Wayne State University, his dissertation topic is a content analysis of the treatment of ancient Egypt in world history textbooks. And just how far is this determined Egyptian willing to go to be classified black?
I want to carry my kids all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary.